Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very excited to seeing you all again. Welcome to this new season of Enrich Your Coffee. We're just talking about it's already season 5, and today is our 35th episode. And so I know it's been a while, but we are very happy to be back. And today, for our first episode of this new season, it's a great pleasure to have Sven Fahrner with us. So he's from Jülich, and he will present us the RI-VIS project and how to foster industry cooperation beyond Europe. So I think that's a quite interesting topic. But now, Sven, the screen is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much for this nice introduction and for having me here again a second time. It is really surprising to see that this is season 5 already. And as I said before, this really speaks for the idea and for the organization of this event. So I guess it's fair to say well done in that aspect. Today, I'm going to present, as has been already mentioned, some information on the so-called RI-VIS project. Which has been a Horizon Europe funded project on increasing visibility of research infrastructures. And obviously, I will focus on these parts of the project that have been aiming at and dealing with industry cooperation beyond Europe. So, as already said, my name being Sven Fahrner, being located in Jülich, Forschungszentrum Jülich, also speaking in the role of being on the coordination side of EMPHASIS, a European infrastructure on plant phenotyping, and then also the work package lead of RI-VIS. So a couple of words just to provide you info on the project. So the project has ended now a couple of months ago. So I have the pleasure to tell you about the very concrete products that this project has achieved. And as you can see, this project brought together multiple research infrastructures in Europe, a little bit unbalanced towards the life science sector, but we try to have also all the other domains integrated by different boards and further activities around this consortia to have also their ideas and their insight into the scope of the project. The whole project would be about increasing the visibility of research infrastructures beyond Europe. So what does it mean? The whole project helped infrastructures to form sustainable global partnerships and collaborations with researchers and further organizations to increase the access to services and expertise for researchers. One of the main activities this project had were the so-called bi-regional symposia. So we picked 3 regions or continents, the first being the whole continent of Africa, the second one, the continent of Australia, and the third, the whole area of Latin America, and held virtual symposia to bring together stakeholders around the topic of infrastructures, including scientists from academia, from industry, funders, policymakers. And these 3 days symposia were a platform to discuss on how people see the situation on research infrastructure collaboration and how to foster them. So we had about 400 participants per symposia, if I got it right. So this was quite helpful and successful. We further developed tools and resources to make it easier for research infrastructures to communicate and to build collaborations. And we built some tools and resources that still exists, that brings people together around the communication issue in the wider sense, just to help each other to share best practices in communication and how to build corporations, also and how to address issues towards industry. And what I have the pleasure to show you in the next 10 minutes is basically products that we would see relevant for the idea of targeting industry and build industry corporations. What I show you now will also be or is also available online on the homepage. So whenever you feel a need to dig deeper into some of these topics in the aftermath of that session, feel free to go to the homepage, RI-VIS.eu, and there is a specific section on resources, and within that section you will find everything that I'm going to present today and also some more stuff, especially in this collaboration resource folder. So that's where you find everything for the next 5 years, because we aim at sustaining the whole the products and the homepage. So it's still there and there for you to be used and to be picked up for your own demands and for your own interests. Digging a little bit deeper into, we see some help for you with these products. So one of the products we came up with is the so-called communication strategy, which describes a step-by-step approach on how, in that case, research infrastructure, but let's say in general scientific institutions, could come up with their own strategy on communication, targeting different stakeholders like the industry. And I took out one of the main, one interesting message that I see in that whole communication strategy document. Because we asked basically the experts in Europe on research infrastructures how they see what works in communicating with industry stakeholders and with industry partners. And as you see on the left side, the dark blue, this is what they see as very important. And it's interesting because they basically aim at conferences, face-to-face meetings, emails, and then websites. And then if you look at all the other tools that we, are using already, it's not really important and helpful in terms of supporting industry collaborations and addressing industry. So what I take out of it from a personal level is that the direct contact and the face-to-face contact and the trustful collaboration, which is growing in factors of trust and knowing each other over years, is still the main approach and the main tool that experts would see. And I'm looking forward to the discussion and see what you would say works in your collaborations with industry. A second product is the so-called communication toolkit. So this is a little bit even more specific and full of details, intended to help institutions and research infrastructures to come up with sound tools of communicating towards different stakeholders. And you can see on the right side, this is going into details of websites, social media, how to deal with resources, also in terms of style and style guides. And it is a reference tool for managers, for operators and communicators of every kind of research infrastructure, independent of domains and scope. What I found in there, or what you can find in there in targeting private sectors, is multiple wise. I took 3 messages out there, which I found quite interesting, just to illustrate to you what you can find in there, and 3 kind of key advices. So the first advice saying target specific types of business, which putting it into another wording for me means understand what the business model is of your collaboration partners from industry side and what benefits they expect and you can bring in. And so that you understand, especially talking about infrastructures that have in many cases a wide range of industry partners, very heterogeneous, with many different business models, that it will be hard to work with one specific type of addressing them. So they have all different needs, they have all different business models, different products that they go to the market. And the better we are able to understand them, the easier it is to collaborate with them. And the second key message falls into the same scope. It says present concrete added values. So where the first message for me goes a little bit more into how to initiate collaborations and how to find collaboration partners in industry, the second one is for me very much on how would you run a collaboration and what is important with them. And the added value part is, I guess, from my experience, again, it's quite different if you address rather big companies, global companies, or if you address SMEs ones, because SMEs have very limited resources in many cases. And if you need to provide a very concrete benefit to them and an added value, and if they don't see them, they don't have a very specific interest to go into deeper collaboration with research infrastructures. The third one is rather a communication issue. Remove technical details from main messages. I found this one quite interesting because it's also valid for dealing with policymakers, for example. And for me, it's especially important when you start kicking off collaborations or trying to find new cooperation partners. So I would say we, mainly being trained as a scientist, we tend to dig very quickly into some details that we find of importance, but it doesn't really help in terms of getting across in the initial stage what you would add as a benefit to the company when it collaborates with you. And well, obviously the 3 dotted points here illustrate there's much more in there that you can see and maybe dig through the document and see what's important for you. A further product is the so-called white papers. And as you see, they align with the 3 regions that we have identified of interest, of special interest for research infrastructures in terms of cooperating. So they are slightly different because they aim mainly at supporting policymakers and research infrastructure representatives in how to improve collaborations on a broader level and a broader scope. The way we did or we developed these white papers has been that, well, basically they are conceptualized as a platform for experts to speak out. So what you find in there is not what RI-VIS representatives would say, but we basically had several dozens experts interviewed and asked them what they see in collaborations between research infrastructures and their counterparts in Europe and in these other areas of the world. And we asked them how they would see the situation, if they know any best practice examples, if they have any good advice towards policymakers or research infrastructure representatives, and how they would see a demand to further develop corporations on this level. So in each of these papers, you will find quite a lot of information on the current situation of research infrastructure cooperation, on gaps and on a lack of development that they would see, on recommendations that the experts would have. But you will also find all the information about the experts that spoke out for interviews. So it gives you the chance to have a look at these papers. And if you find some very interesting point that is of interest for you, you can obviously contact directly these experts, or you contact the authors of these white papers to your own benefit. So just to say that these white papers had not a specific focus of industry issues. So you will find a lot of information on issues relevant for policymakers and also for running infrastructures, but there are also some information, not a majority, but there is at least some information about industry engagement. And so I would just propose to you that you just, if you find some time, download them, see through it and see what is of interest for you and where it helps you. And the very last activity that I would like to bring up is this Communicator Community that this network has developed. So it is based on a series of workshops that we had started at the beginning of the project, bringing together people at research infrastructures being involved in issues of communication from all domains, from all regions, from all areas. And it turned out that there's been a lot of interest and demand in keeping to share experiences and share information and share knowledge. And what we did then from the RI-VIS side was basically to support this kind of grassroots development. And we set up a Slack platform, allowing all people around communicating issues to share experiences and to develop joint activities. And that's what they do. So I have some analytics here, which I took yesterday. So currently there are 400 members in the Slack activity. We have more than 30,000 messages sent so far within about 2 years. And last month we had more than 1,500 messages being spread in this Slack activity. And what it shows to me is that this is not basically a kind of dead platform, but there really is a benefit for the people doing it and using it, because otherwise they just wouldn't be that active. So interestingly, what I saw is that we have many channels in there revolving around different topics. So some of them are just about informing each other about events, about latest news, about developments. Some are more specific, as a channel, for example, about environmental sciences. But what we don't have yet is a dedicated industry-related channel for some reason. So the communication about industry still is kind of, let's say, across all the other channels. And I just wondered if this group, if Enrich would be interested in setting something like that up, making use of the Slack platform, and then let it grow and let people start sharing experiences and see what they bring up. And if so, I'm happy, obviously, to establish contact to the coordinator of RI-VIS, which is the Instruct Eric in Oxford, who just run the platform. And I'm sure that we would be able to support that activity as well if there's some need in there. So this is just kind of a quick, short, coffee-related insight into the RI-VIS activities. As I said, feel free to go to the homepage, dig deeper into all these products, and take what's of interest for you. I would thank at that moment also the RI-VIS partners, also Instruct as a coordinating institution who really has done some great job. And it was really a pleasure to work on that project. It's not a pleasure to work on all projects, as we all know, but this has been really a nice one and a great experience. So yeah, I'm happy to take questions, to go into further discussions at that point, obviously. And yeah, happy to see where we lead the discussion now.
Thank you so much. This was very interesting. I mean, I obviously have a billion of questions, but maybe we can have a coffee and another time to go deeper. A lot of opportunities. Maybe I actually had a question on your last slide with the Communicator Community, like who's in, how does it work, and what's the perspective actually for the industry aspect. This is something, I mean, I remember we had this internal discussion with the COM team about the Slack, and well, I'm curious to see if that works well. So then maybe we can test it, and that could be something we can still do in the remaining months. Also, maybe with you around, like all the people here, would you? Is it a tool that you use? Is it a tool that you find useful if you use it? Is it something that you could see in the future where you can keep contact with the Enrich community to exchange on topics such as industry and so on? So that also raised a lot of questions. I actually also have questions on like the topic about the role of research infrastructure in like the international landscape, and how the relationship that works, and is there a way that European research infrastructure, the way European research infrastructure work with industry, can this be taken as a model outside Europe, or do we have more to learn from others? Probably maybe a bit of both. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to read all my questions, but that's probably the main ones. And if anyone else have questions, just raise your hands.
So while people think about the questions, I can maybe provide some ideas and input on your second, which was about the role model. I guess what we see, it is rather hard to take industry cooperation in Europe as a role model to go beyond Europe. We see already difficulties in the understanding of what a research infrastructure would be. So what we've learned is that when you go beyond Europe and start talking to people about research infrastructures, you start explaining what you mean by what is a research infrastructure. So what we are used to understanding in a research infrastructure is not the way that other people, other continents would understand. And it definitely needs some joint understanding and some exchange on what do you mean by different terminologies, by different approaches. And the same, I think, goes for industry cooperation. So because there's one factor, it's not a surprising factor, obviously, and it's so, maybe it's naive in some way to say it, but it is part of the cultural aspect in there. So it is, industry cooperation is from a cultural perspective completely different in the different regions, and it's not even possible, obviously, to say there's a certain aspect in Latin America that you could take as a role model. But it's very much down to the persons, it's very much down to the background of the persons, and also to the political surroundings, to the political expectations. And so it is, I understand the idea of saying, which is for me a European perspective of saying it works so well in some cases in Europe, why don't we just transfer it to some other continents? But conditions are so different that at least for what I've learned also in these white paper developments, that the first step is gaining much more understanding on both sides. And then you could potentially think about bits and pieces from European corporations taking over to some other continents. But this is a very personal assessment. Anna, please. Oh, sorry, Anne, did I?
No, I didn't. That's thank you, Anna. If you could just go ahead.
Yeah, hello. So I think, Sven, you actually started answering my question before I even posed it. So what I was interested in having your views on, and I apologize, but I haven't actually reviewed all the white papers, is actually if you have observed any differences, and I think the answer is yes, in the way that research infrastructures brand themselves in different parts of the world. How do they present themselves to the research community, but also to the policymakers? And I think there is, of course, this issue of terminology and what do we mean by research infrastructure in different parts of the world. But for me, it was mostly to see whether there are some, let's say, specific specificities that you could find in the way research infrastructures present themselves and their services in terms of communication. And also, I mean, in Europe, we are quite keen nowadays to put forward the social economic impacts of research infrastructures beyond, let's say, the pure scientific impacts. Is this something that you also see in other parts of the world, or is the focus there maybe still more on science? So just a curiosity for me to get a bit of insights from your experience.
Yeah, and I will try to meet this curiosity somehow. I think I'll start differentiating a little bit. So if we go to the Australian side, this is very close to, I guess, what we understand in Europe as an infrastructure, also in terms of aiming for socioeconomic impact. So they have also in terms of organization, they have a kind of overarching panel, which is not an S3 panel, but which is a ministry alignment on ministry level that has a huge impact on the infrastructures, and that has recently also come out with some assessment on socioeconomic impact of infrastructures in Australia. And I guess you can go back to the history and to the connections that Europe would have with Australia, explaining a little bit why it is that way. It's very different in the Latin American side and on the African side. I think on the African side, it's even more difficult because, well, we aimed at talking about Africa and Europe, but Africa itself is so much, you know, there's so many differences. So we had most contacts with the South African side, which is, I guess, due to the economic status of South Africa in comparison to other countries. As far as I understand it, they also have this kind of socioeconomic ambition on some place, but they work on a different level, obviously, in terms of resources and the leverage they could have. Latin America, in that sense, I guess, is the most complicated one, because I didn't see the whole concept of research infrastructures as we understand it. So I see it in Australia. I got to understand it also in some domains in Africa, but Latin America has, at least I didn't see the concept of a research infrastructure as we understand it. So you rather have single institutions also providing services on a single level, but this is, I guess, quite different from what you would say a pan-country organization doing something like a services. But it rather goes down to single organizations, sometimes of really large organizations like Embrapa, for example, that goes across countries, but this is more as a scientific institution as we would know it, and not what we would call a research infrastructure. Does this help a little bit, Anna?
Thank you. Sorry, thanks. Yes, very interesting. Thank you.
Is there more questions or maybe experiences with Slack, or how do you?
I have a quite technical question about the Slack. Were you there when it was set up? Do you know how you set it up and how you started getting people to engage with one another and basically get the conversation started? I mean, did you already pre-plan these different channels of communication, or how did that process go?
Well, content-wise, it is driven by the people using it. So when we set it up, we had some, let's say, general channels preset. One about introduction, which says, okay, a new member, you have the chance to introduce yourself and give some information. And I think one was about information, which is then on information sharing on events, for example. But everything else happening is just driven by the community and by the users. So it's very easy to join. Basically, it's just, I think, 2 clicks, then you can participate in the Slack channel. And then it's up to the users to form it in the way they want to have it. And we didn't drive it in that sense. We just communicated about the possibility of that Slack channel. And that's how it works. And from my personal opinion, this can only be the way forward, because if there's no benefit for the users using it, why would you then run such a platform? What I found quite curious is that people found a way to make it beneficial for them. So with new topics coming up on all details, so we had discussions about, do you know a conference hotel, something that I could use, about software programs, about events taking place, about scientific questions. So just by having this platform, by realizing that so many people in there, it seems that it triggered people to come up with questions and with aspects that they would like to discuss and get some feedback. Yeah, does this answer your points, Madison?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really incredible that it just kicked off and went.
How do you communicate about these Slack channels or the platform? Because then you have the different subgroups inside that are created once you're in. But how do you get new members eventually, and who's in this?
It started it started initially with this workshop, and it was kind of a platform to enable communication within RI-VIS between people working on the communication side. So this was the starting point. And but there was no reason not to opening up. So obviously RI-VIS is about visibility. That means wherever we went to and where we had presentation, we just told people about that one. And we let people just jump on board and see if it's of benefit for them. And to answer your question, who's in there, to be honest, I don't really know anymore.
I'm in there.
You can give a...
there we go.
But how is it?
Yeah, it's really great. I'm more in the communications people channel. So we had this workshop for research infrastructures, communication departments. Basically, it's a really nice tailored workshop, because wherever you look online, no one tells you how to communicate about research infrastructures. So RI-VIS provided this really great training course, and then afterwards, the communications people stayed in touch via the Slack channel. And it's been really great. I think the real benefit of Slack is that it's used widely. And of course, you can't get people there if they don't have any business there. So I know in a lot of institutions, they use Slack as just, like, for example, we use Teams. Some institutions use Slack. And in that way, it's really convenient. For me, I only use it for this communications people kind of group channel. And not much else, but I can imagine if I'm using it institutionally, it's even more incentivized for me to stay up to speed. But I have my notifications on, and yeah, it's a really great gathering place for comms people of research infrastructure.
Right, it's time to stop the conversation, but on the notification aspect, because I remember this was one limit we would see, that if you get bombed with notification, like is that bothering? Or I mean, I'm using Slack on other things as well, so I like it. I think it's a very straightforward way to communicate, or to reach out to people. But I don't know, I'm mean, are you annoyed with receiving notification when you use it, or?
Me,
Or did you get, yeah, I mean, you maybe because you practice it, or Sven, like, did you hear any feedback on that, or, you know, the limits?
Well, let's put it that way. So we use it also internally in our projects, and also in the institutions that we have. And I don't know where it is, if it's hidden or not, but you can basically deactivate your notifications. So it just leaves you all the freedom that you say, whenever something new comes up, just let me know about that one, but not about the other ones. And I have it basically deactivated. I look at it whenever I think I have time to it. And so it's not annoying at all. It's just there, and I use it whenever I want to use it. And so that's from my experience.
Okay, well, maybe it's time to go to our next meetings. It's 3:32, but thank you very much. I mean, that was very interesting, and I hope we have more opportunity to discuss these aspects further. So we're going to meet again in April. Stay tuned. We will communicate on the topics and everything. If you have any idea for a topic or anything that you would like to present, please contact us. We will be happy to help you with organizing something. And yeah, so have a great end of the day, and we see you in April. Stay well.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye. Thank you.